So welcome to my presentation on the diversity, ecology, and evolution of the Volvocine algae, also called Chlamydomonadales. So these organisms are green algae, they're photoautotrophs, and they are eukaryotic. They're relatively related to land plants as far as algae go. They are able to live in most of the freshwater aquatic environments around the world, and we see them in really cold places and decently hot places like here. Basically, the only requirement is that they have some water to exist in. Pictured on the right, that pond is absolutely full of Volvox, one of the Volvocine algae, and I'm hanging off a fence trying to get a sample. The main lifestyle of the Volvocine algae is as photoautotrophs, and they use their flagella to stay motile and be in areas of decent light. One of the things that makes the Chlamydomonadales kind of unique is that they have a lot of group living genera that work together to use their flagella to stay motile. In whatever environment they're in, they usually make up the base of the food web, of course being primary producers is algae. And one of the labs that we do in Intro Bio is a microscopy lab where we watch rotifers eat Chlamydomonadales. I have a picture here of a rotifer. I couldn't get one with Chlamydomonas, which is what I really wanted, but here is a rotifer in an environment full of Pandorhino, which is one of the more multicellular Volvocines. When we're talking about the Chlamydomonadales, I think there's really three genera that kind of illustrate the broad spectrum of diversity within this group. The first one we're going to be talking about is Chlamydomonas. This is unicellular, and it is probably what's closest to the ancestor of the entire order. They're not particularly complicated little guys, but one thing that is interesting about them is under certain conditions, like predation, settling selection, they can form palmoid clusters where they essentially fail to break away when they replicate. Another interesting thing that doesn't have to do so much with multicellularity, but you can see in this picture, is that they have a little eye spot, which is the kind of orange thing on the side, and that's actually photosensitive, and they use that to identify areas of light to swim towards. Representing kind of the intermediate of the Chlamydomonadales is gonium. It's a facultative multicellular organism that exists usually in these 16-cell plates. One thing that's really interesting about it is that it can break up into unicells if it decides to. When it's in the groups, though, it has a couple of group adaptations. There's cooperative motility, so all these cells in the plate work together to swim towards wherever the colony wants to go. They have an extracellular matrix, and they do have genetic control over cell number. The most kind of complicated and derived genus, which is actually a paraphyletic, is Volvox. These are committed, integrated, and differentiated multicellular organisms. So they have specialized germ soma, and they are not able to split up. The cells have basically no fitness on their own outside of the colony. Pictured here are some phylogenies where you can see relatedness of the different Volvocines and the kind of like advancing group-oriented living. This diversity comes from a pretty extreme adaptive radiation event that happened around 250 million years ago. The order is only 300 million years old. Pictured here is a chronogram, so it's basically a phylogeny with time markers, where you can see the divergence that happens in the Volvocine lines. Something that I find really interesting about this is there are numbered traits that are assigned to different forks based on parsimony. And one thing that we see is that some traits are really fundamental and occur once and exist in basically all of the multicellular lineages, even the simpler ones. And some other traits have been gained or lost multiple times. All right, here are my image sources. Thanks for listening to my presentation.